Alright, so we're going to go through the review, make sure you are checking things as you are going. So you have your railroad tracks on the first one. We always move our constant first, keep that variable over there, so the opposite of adding 8 would be subtracting 8. I do that on both sides. I bring down what's left on the left side. Negative 9 minus 8 would give me negative 17. So I have n is equal to negative 17. On this problem, sorry, I was looking for my calculator. Okay, on this problem, the way you would check is my n would be negative 17 plus 8, and when I hit equals, it should give me that negative 9, and it did, so I know that it works. Okay, next one, I do my railroad tracks, and I find my variable. I have to get rid of that constant on that side. Since it is a constant, we will add or subtract. Since it was a negative, I would do the opposite, which is adding. I'd add 4.9 on this side, which means I have to add 4.9 on that side. When I do, all that's left over here is g, and on this side, when I do negative 0.4 plus 4.9, I end up with 4.5. So I get g is equal to 4.5. By the way, it really helps me out when you circle your answers, so please try to do that when you are going through your quiz. So when we go to do our check, I'm really typing in for g 4.5 minus 4.9, and I'm hoping it's giving me negative 0.4. So 4.5 minus 4.9, and it did, so I know that one is correct. Next one, I do my railroad tracks. I have to get rid of this constant on the same side as the variable. Constant, I either add or subtract. Remember, you always look at the sign in front, not the sign behind. So I would add 4 to both sides. That cancels, and I have a is equal to 19. When I would check, it would be negative 4 plus 19. As I read it straight across, and that would be 15, hopefully. So negative 4 plus 19, and it does give me 15, so that one is correct. On the next one, this is no longer a constant with a variable, it is a coefficient. Coefficients are right in front of the variable, or a number with a variable. Since it's multiplying in between, the opposite is dividing, so I'm going to divide by 3 on both sides. I get c is equal to negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. When I would go to check, I'd be doing 3 times that c we just found, so 3 times negative 6 equals negative 18. Let's see if that works. 3 times negative 6, that is negative 18. So that is my answer. Okay. Now, when you take your quiz, you are not going to have to write this out, but I am telling you, you should be writing it out or typing it in your calculator. Okay? You should be knowing, do I have these answers correct before you are turning them in? So number 5. Hopefully you're thinking about right now, is that number a constant or a coefficient? Remember, constant is a number that stands alone. Coefficient is a number with a variable, so that is a coefficient. Coefficients we divide. So that would be negative 6, not adding 6. I know somebody on their quiz is going to try to add 6 to cancel. You can only add and subtract when it is a constant, a number by itself. Okay? So when I divide by negative 6 on that side, I end up with just b left, so I'm going to switch the order right now. B is equal to a negative divided by negative is a positive. 72 divided by 6 is 7. I'm sorry, 42, not 72. 42 divided by 6 is 7, and when I go to check, negative 42 is equal to negative 6 times 7, so let's see, negative 6 times 7, does that give me negative 42? And it does. Okay, next one. We haven't had one quite like this yet. On this one, this is a divided by 4, so the opposite would be to multiply by 4 on both sides. Now, some of you wanted to flip it and do the reciprocal, multiply by the reciprocal. If you are doing that, you have to think of it not as 4 over w, but that this number out front is really a 1. So you could do 4 over 1. Remember, 4 over 1 is the same thing just as 4. So these are really two methods of doing the same work. Either way, my 4's cancel, and I'd have W is equal to negative times a positive is a negative. 8 times 4 is 32. And I'm going to check. I'd put my W, that negative 32 on the top, divided by 4, and hopefully I'm getting negative 8. So negative 32 divided by 4, or you can use the fraction button either way. It'd help if I typed it in correctly. And I do get negative 8, so that one works. Next one, back to just a constant with the variable. So we would subtract 5 on both sides since it was adding 5. That would give me W is equal to, and that would be negative 25. So when I check negative 25 plus 5, let's see if I get negative 20. And I do, so that one works. On this one, we add 7.2, so the opposite would be subtract. So minus 7.2 minus 7.2. I would get T is equal to 1.65 minus 7.2, and it would be negative 5.55. When we go to check it, I'd plug in T is that number, plus the 7.2, and it hopefully should be giving me 1.65. And it did, so that one works. Hopefully the first 8 on the quiz are going to be easy ones for you. They should all be one-step equations. That means you're doing one thing. You're either subtracting, you're adding, you're dividing, or you're multiplying. That's what the first 8 should be for you, I believe. Okay? After this, we do still have a couple that are one-step equations, but now they're with decimals or fractions, things like that. So on this one, we would do our railroad tracks. Since this is a full fraction, we do have to multiply by the reciprocal. So I would multiply, and the reciprocal means we flip it upside down. So the top is now 3 and the bottom is now 2. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Now my 3's cancel, my 2's cancel. All I have left over here is x. On the other side, if I take negative 8 times 3 over 2, I end up with negative 12 as my answer. So I'm going to check it, and that would be 2/3 times negative 12. You can use parentheses or a times sign, doesn't really matter. And hopefully it gives me negative 8. So 2/3 times negative 12, and it did. Again, this one was just like number 4 and number 5. Please, please, please make sure you understand that this is a coefficient, not a constant. If it was a constant, a number by itself, you could do subtraction or addition. But since it is a coefficient, you have to multiply or divide. This one, since you're already multiplying, the opposite would be division. And so when I do that, I get P is equal to negative 4.5 divided by negative 0.15 would be 30. So when I go to check it, hopefully I get negative 4.5 when I do negative 0.15 times 30. So negative 0.15 times 30. And that does give me negative 4.5, so that one works. This one's the trickiest one we've had so far. The first thing you have to do is change these into improper fractions. We can't do anything yet with the mixed numbers. So remember, to do that, we take 3 times 2 plus 1. So 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Keep the bottom number. On this other side, we have to do the same thing. 10 times 2 is 20, plus 1 is 21. Keep the bottom number. Now that we have our improper fractions, Now this is just like before, like on number 9, where we had to multiply by the reciprocal. So when I do this, I'm going to multiply by 3/7, multiply by 3/7. I know my 3's and my 7's cancel. And when I type this in, 21/10 times 3/7, I end up with 9/10. So if I would check that, I'd do 2 1/3 times 9/10, and hopefully it gives me 2 1/10. Remember to type in 2 1/3, 2 fraction button 1 fraction button 3 times 9 fraction button 10, and it does give me 2 1/10. So that one works. The next section, I do my railroad tracks. Now that I have two-step equations, that means I have to do two things. I have to get rid of the 5 and I have to get rid of the 3, where all of the other ones only had one number on the same side as the variable. If there's only one number on the same side as the variable, that's a one-step equation. Here's our two steps. When you are doing two steps, you always have to get rid of that constant first. Never go to the coefficient first, okay? So when we are looking at this one, you would start by getting rid of that constant. You always do the constant on the same side as the variable. If I would subtract 14 here, there would be nothing left on the side. We never want a one-sided equation, okay? So this would be 3m is equal to 9. Then to solve, I would divide by 3, and m would be equal to 3. When I would go to check, 3 times 3 plus 5, I'm just following straight along here, but instead of m, I'm writing in that number, equals 14. So let's try it. 3 times 3 plus 5 equals 14. So that is the correct answer. Next one, I'm going to put in my railroad tracks. My constant on the side with the variable is 2. Since it was a plus 2, my opposite is subtract 2. So 11 minus 2 is 9. I would get 1/3 a. To get rid of that fraction, remember, this is like that 9 and that 11. To get rid of that, we multiply by the reciprocal. So that way my 3's cancel and my 1's cancel, and all I would have left on the side is a. On the other side, 3 times 9 would be 27. So I have a is equal to 27 as my answer. When I go to check, I know I want it to equal 11 when I type in 1/3 times a, which is 27, plus 2. So on this one, I would type in 1/3 times 27 plus 2, and I do get 11 on that one. So that works. Next one, I do my railroad tracks. I would find my constant on the same side as the variable. I'm trying to trick you on this one because this time the constant came first. Normally we always put our constants last when we have a coefficient. Okay, so this one's trying to trick you here. The constant is first. Remember, always look at the sign in front. Because this is a negative, we do the opposite. If this was just a 3, the opposite would have been -3 or -3. Be very careful about that. I cancel that out. -48 plus 3 is -45. The other thing you have to be very careful about is making sure that when this is out front, you are bringing down this sign. So this was a positive, so it's just 5n. If this before was a subtraction sign, when you bring it down, it now becomes a negative. A lot of you were forgetting that on your homework the other day. So don't forget to almost like cover that up and see, okay, what's left on that side? What's left on that side? And that's what you're bringing down. Okay? From there, I would divide by 5 on both sides, and I would get n is equal to -9. So when I check that, I would go straight across. Don't flip anything around. -3 plus 5 times n is -9, and it should give me -48. So let's see. negative 3 times 5, I'm sorry, I wrote that wrong, negative 3 plus 5 times negative 9, and it did give me negative 48. Okay. Continuing on, number 15. On number 15, first thing I would do is look at that constant. The opposite is to subtract on both sides. Notice again, I cover that up, and what I bring down is a negative 2k. Do not forget about that negative there. Negative 3 minus 7 is negative 10. At this point, I have to get rid of that negative 2, and it is a coefficient. Since it is a coefficient, I cannot add 2. Somebody's going to do that on the quiz. Somebody's going to do it every single year. But please try your best not to be you making that mistake. Negative 2 is what I am dividing by, so that k is equal to 5. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 10 divided by 2 is 5. When I test this out, I don't really have a lot of room to write it here. So negative 2 times k is 5 plus 7, and it does give me negative 3, so that one works. On the next one, notice how the next one is different than every other problem we have done. When we did some problems like this on the homework the other day, this was the section that everybody was like, I don't know how to do this. Remember, on these, you have to get rid of that divided by 12 first, or whatever it is dividing by, because that fraction bar is going across the entire thing. So we can't touch that 9 until we get rid of this part. So the opposite of dividing is multiplying. If we multiply by 12 on both sides, that means this cancels, and I have 9 plus t is equal to negative 36. From there, I have to get rid of that 9, that constant, so I would subtract it, and I have t is equal to, and if you need to, if you have a lot of negatives or minus signs, I'd type it in. Negative 36 minus 9, negative 45. So t is equal to negative 45. Now, when you type this in to check, be very, very careful about how you do it. Remember, you type in 9 plus my t, and then since it's a long fraction bar, that means I'm dividing this whole thing together. Your calculator will not understand if you just do divided by 12 at this point. So instead, I have to, once I type the top in, hit equals. So I know the top is negative 36. Now divide by 12. And I would get negative 3. So if you do your checking correctly on this, it might accidentally tell you you have it wrong when you don't really. Be careful on that one. On the last one on the front side, we put in our railroad tracks. From here, we have to get rid of this constant on the same side as the variable, so we would subtract 1 on both sides. Negative 6 minus 1 gives me negative 7. N divided by 8 is left. Okay. From there, to get rid of a divided by 8, the opposite is to multiply by 8. Remember when we talked about one like this earlier, we said if you really want to, you can make this into the reciprocal. Just do not use n on the bottom. You should be using that coefficient of the n, which is 1. So you're only ever doing the numbers. Never try to cancel the n, or the variable. Okay? So I would have n is equal to negative 56. When I go to do my check, I'm hoping it gives me negative 6 when I type in negative 56 over 8 plus 1, and it did give me negative 6, so that one works. Okay, so even if you are not writing out your check, like I didn't have room on the last 3, if you are not writing them out, I should still see the check, meaning that you actually typed them in to check it. Okay? Backside. On these, remember, it does help to actually circle the numbers and box the variable. So here my numbers 8, 3, 19. I'm just going to do them all at once. 7, 2, 6, 9, 5, negative 30. When I box, it says a number, a number, a number. From there, when I look through these, the sum of 8 times a number and 3. Sum means I am adding, so I'm taking 8 times a number, and I am adding it to 3, and it's going to equal to 19. So I'm adding 8 times a number with 3. That and is almost like the word with, okay? So I'm adding 8 times a number with 3. 8 times a number plus 3, and it's going to be 19. The next two, I am telling you, you're going to see it like this on your quiz. You really need to pay attention to more than and less than, because those are your turnaround phrases. Turnaround means I have to do the second part first. Not that I'm switching just one section with one section. I do the second part first, then before I hit equals 6, I do more 7, okay? So the quotient of a number and 2. Quotient means divide. And remember that and almost means with. We are dividing a number with 2. A number with 2. And then I'm taking 7 more than that. It equals 6. Okay? On this one, 9 less than 5 times a number is equal to negative 30. I'm not going to do 9 first because this is a turnaround. I'll do 5 times a number first. 5 times a number. Now it is 9 less than that amount is equal to negative 30. So make sure you understand what those turnaround phrases look like. Okay? It is not just swapping the numbers. I've had a lot of you try to do just switch around the 9 and the 5. Nope, you have to do this entire part together. 5 times a number, then I go back and take 9 away from it. Okay? The next part, everybody's favorite, the story problems. I promise you they're not that bad, okay? It says a company employs 72 workers. It plans to increase the number of employees by 6 per month until it has 144 workers. How many months will it take it to get to 144 workers? Well, if it's asking how many months, I'm going to say M is for months. How many months will it take to get to that amount? And I know we started with 72 workers, and we are increasing, which is addition, 6 each month till we get a total at the end of 144. So that's what my equation would look like. I'll solve, subtract 72 on both sides, and then I get 6m is equal to 72. I divide by my coefficient, and I find that m is equal to, and again, if you need to use your calculator, get it out. 72 divided by 6, and you're going to find it's 12. Okay? Then the meaning part of it is you do actually have to write your sentence out. So what is this saying? It will take 12 months to reach 144 workers. Okay? Your sentence does not have to be exactly like mine, but they have to have the same gist of it. They have to correctly be stating what that 12 is talking about in this story problem. Okay? Next one. When diving, the Falcon can reach the speeds of up to 175 miles per hour. The top speed of the Falcon is 20 miles per hour, less than 3 times the speed of a cheetah. What is the cheetah's top speed? So I'm going to use C for cheetah's top speed. And this one was kind of wordy, so it's kind of confusing at first, but when you think of like which one was like the total at the end, it was the 175, okay, because that is the top speed that the Falcon could reach. Then the other half is talking about the top speed of the Falcon is 20 less than is that turnaround, so that means I'm really doing 20 and putting it after whatever I'm subtracting, or whatever I have at the beginning and subtracting. And then it says 3 times the cheetah's speed. Well, cheetah's speed would be 3c. Okay? I thought that one was kind of a tricky one to be writing out correctly. So 3 times the cheetah speed, and then 20 less than that is what the Falcon's top speed would be. When we solve, you would add 20 to both sides. So I'd have 3c is equal to 195. I would divide by 3 on both sides. I don't know that one off the top of my head. And I'd get 65. So what is the cheetah's top speed? The cheetah's top speed is 65 miles per hour. Okay. 24. Trey went to the batting cages to practice hitting. He rented a helmet for $4 and paid 75 cents for each group of 20 pitches. He spent a total of $7 at the batting cages. How many groups of pitches did he pay for? So I'm going to use G for groups of pitches. Okay. When I think about my total was that he spent $7. And the other side of it, I always have someone try to use 20. 20 was just extra information of how many were in a group. We don't care how many total it was, we just want to know how many of those groups of 20 there were. So we're not actually using 20 in this. Instead, we're saying he paid $4 for the helmet, and then he also paid 75 cents for each of those groups. So that's what your equation would look like. If you had 0.75 G plus 4 equals 7, same thing. On mine, the way I would solve, so I would pay attention to that this is a positive 4, so my opposite would be negative 4 on both sides. That gives me that 75/100ths G is equal to 3. Even though it is a decimal, this is a coefficient, so to solve I would divide. And if you need to, go ahead and do this. 3 divided by that, and you would get 4. So we would say something like he paid for 4 groups of pitches. Okay. The last one is kind of a tricky one. Okay. On this last one, we haven't had a problem like this. First of all, it talks about perimeter. Remember, perimeter is the entire distance around the outside. This is a rectangle. So because it's a rectangle, you should know opposite sides are equal to each other. If this is W, that means this is W. If this is 2W plus 3, this is 2W plus 3. Okay? The question says use the image to find the width of the rectangle. So I'm trying to find W, which is the width. When I think this through, okay, if I have to add all of these up together, that means I'm going to look at it and say, here I have a W, and then I put another W with it, and then I put 2 more W's with it, and then 2 more W's with it. So if I think of this as like dollars, $1 plus another dollar plus 2 more dollars plus 2 more dollars would end up being $6. So that would really be 6 W's. 1 W plus 1 W plus 2 W's plus 2 W's is 6 W's. Then I have my other half of this is plus 3 plus 3. That's really plus 6. And if I put all of it together, that's the perimeter, which it said the perimeter is 36 units, so equals 36. Once I have that written out, I can solve. That one again was kind of tricky. We haven't done one quite like that yet. So minus 6 on both sides. 6w is equal to 30. Do not panic, there's not one quite like this on the quiz. Divide by 6 on both sides, and we get w is equal to 5. Okay, so the meaning is the width of the rectangle is 5 units. Okay? So this looks very similar to the quiz, except the front side, there's 17 problems just like this. Okay? The back side, there's 4 of this section, and then there's 2 story problems, and then there's a bonus story problem. Okay? Bonus, remember, you do not have to do if you do not want to. You are welcome to try it, but you do not need to. It cannot hurt you, though. So if you try it, even if you get it wrong, it does not count against you. So you might as well just try it and see if you can get some extra points if you have extra time at the end. Okay? Hopefully that all made sense. I know I kind of went over it quickly, but I wanted to make sure we got through all of it in one class period, so that way you were ready to go for your quiz in the next class. Okay? If you do have any questions, make sure you are asking.